The Secretary will read the first and second orders together.
Introduction Appropriation Bill and tabling of the Division of Revenue Bill. Introduction Revenue Laws Amendment Bill.
Honorable the Minister of Finance.
Honourable Speaker, Mr. President, Mr. Deputy President, Cabinet colleagues and Deputy Ministers, the Governor of the Reserve Bank and Deputy Governors, the MECs of Finance from our provinces, and fellow South Africans. I have the honour today to present the 2016 budget of President Zuma's second administration. We do so in a spirit of frankness, both about our challenges and the opportunity to turn our economy's direction towards hope, confidence, and a better future for all. Low growth, high unemployment, extreme inequality, and hurtful fractures in our society, these are unacceptable, I believe, to all of us. I have a simple message from government. We are strong enough, resilient enough, and creative enough to manage and overcome our economic challenges. All of us want jobs, thriving businesses, engaged professionals, the narrowing of inequality, and fewer people in poverty. All of us want new values and a new paradigm, a society at peace with itself, a nation energized by the task of building stronger foundations for our future society and economy. We want our government to function effectively, our people to work in dignity, with resources for their families, decent homes, and opportunities for their children. We want to see progress throughout our land, in agriculture, in manufacturing, mining and construction, in tourism, science and research, sport and leisure, trade and commerce. I believe it is within our grasp to achieve this future. It, however, requires bold and constructive leadership in all sectors of society, a shared vision, a common purpose, and the will to find common ground. Above all, we need action, not just words. Let us unite as a South African team, sharing our skills and resources, building social solidarity, defending the institutions of our democracy, and developing our economy inclusively. We believe we do have a plan to firstly manage our finances in a prudent and sustainable way. Secondly, reignite confidence and mobilize the resources of all of our social partners. Collectively invest more in infrastructure to increase the potential growth of our economy. Give hope to our youth through training and economic opportunities, protect South Africans from the effects of the drought, continuously improve our education and health systems, accelerate transformation towards an inclusive economy and participation by all, strengthen social solidarity and extend our social safety net. The budget rests on the idea of an inclusive social contract, encompassing an equitable burden of tax and a progressive program of expenditures. The budget relies on institutions of good governance and a public ethic that values honesty and fairness. If we act together on the basis of these principles, as public representatives, civil servants, business people, youth, workers, and citizens, we can overcome the challenges of tough economic times and difficult adjustments. In acting together, we can address declining confidence and the retreat of capital, and we can combat emerging patterns of predatory behavior and corruption. We are conscious of the difficulties we face. Our resilience as a nation, black and white, can propel us to a better future if we make the right choices. Honourable Speaker, I hereby table before the House in this pack of documents the 2016 budget speech as read out, the 2016 budget review, including the fiscal framework, the revenue proposals, customs and excise duties, and estimates of national revenue. And thirdly, our responses to the budgetary review and recommendation reports, the Division of Revenue Bill, the Appropriation Bill, the estimates of national expenditure. These are all the documents that you find here. I am, in addition, introducing the Revenue Laws Amendment Bill 2016 to adjust certain provisions regarding the retirement funds and matters related to retirement funds. These are our budget proposals, and I look forward to further engagement through the parliamentary budget process. Honourable Speaker, the past year has seen a deterioration in the global economy. In our own region, weaker business confidence coincides with a severe drought, bringing with it rising prices and threats to water supply in many areas. In addition, we have to confront the impact of slow growth on our public finances while continuing to respond to the expectations of citizens and communities for improved education, reliable local services, and responsive public administration. The combination of multiple demands and constrained resources seems overwhelming and almost paradoxical. How does the state deal with such complexity, and how do we prioritize? And this budget is about prioritization. As in the past, we have sought advice from citizens. This year, I sought budget pointers on several specific things. What does government do well? What should we stop doing? And how can we achieve inclusive growth? On what we do well, South Africans were very clear. Firstly, we pay social grants well, and secondly, we collect tax revenue well. Secondly, what should we stop doing? Excuse me. Corruption and waste, and bailing out state entities, both of which we agree with. Thirdly, how do we support inclusive growth? And here the response overwhelmingly was support for small businesses and job opportunities targeting the youth. I greatly appreciate the response from almost 1,500 South Africans to that request. In our presence today in the gallery is Mr. Faik Sunday and Ms. Tuli Ngubane, who have kindly agreed to be with us. Mr. Sunday's advice was that, and I quote, "We should build more roads and train routes because the sooner you get a worker at the desk or machine, the more productive the economy will be," end of quote. And I'm sure you agree with him. And Ms. Ngubane expressed the views of so many people, and I quote, "Let our schools' infrastructure be improved so that all schools are conducive to learning. This will ensure that we produce the quality of students that can take our country forward," end of quote. I'm not sure if Minister Motseka organized this. We agree, and indeed these are central priorities of the National Development Plan. As points of departure for the 2016 budget, Honourable Speaker, allow me to emphasize several broad principles that flow through our National Development Plan. It is a program for inclusive growth. Our social programs, industrial action plan, promotion of agriculture and rural development, skills and training initiatives, investment in housing and municipal services are aimed at both prosperity and equity, creating opportunities for all and broadening economic participation. It is a plan for a strong mixed economy in which public services and state actions complement private investment, expansion of trade, and social enterprise. It recognizes that the improvements in the quality of education are the foundations of broad-based growth, productivity improvement, and sustainable growth. It acknowledges that investment in infrastructure has to be enhanced and sustained both to underpin economic growth and address the spatial inefficiency and fragmentation of the apartheid landscape. It also emphasizes that employment creation has to be accelerated if growth is to be inclusive, and that income security for all relies also on appropriate social security, health services, and social development programs. It prioritized building the capability of the state and strong leadership throughout society to drive development and promote social cohesion. It highlights that partnership between government, business, organized labor, and civil society is the key to policy coherence and more rapid development. The budget table today, honorable members, is guided by the NDP. It is a budget for inclusive growth. It emphasizes partnerships amongst role players in our economy. It prioritizes education and infrastructure investment. It supports employment creation, and it contributes to building a capable developmental state. In brief, we propose the following in this budget. Against the background of slow growth, rising debt, and higher interest rates, the pace of fiscal consolidation will be accelerated. The budget deficit will be reduced compared to the MTBPS figures that this House had learned in October. The budget deficit will be reduced to 3.2% in 2016-17, 2.8% in 2017-18, and 2.4% in 2018-19. This is indeed the tightening of the belt. The expenditure ceiling is cut over the next 3 years by 25 billion rands, mainly by curtailing personnel expenditure. And what we mean here is that we're cutting government expenditure. Tax increases amounting to 18 billion rands in 2016-17 are proposed, and a further 15 billion rands a year needs to be found in 2017-18 and 18-19. 93 billion rands is allocated to higher education over the next 3 years, funded through reprioritization of expenditure plans. NSFAS receives 41.2 billion rands. Minister Nzimande smiles for the first time. Taking into account projected increases in the cost of living, 11.5 billion rands is added to social grant allocations over the next 3 years. Funds have been prioritized to respond to the impact of the drought on the farming sector and on water-stressed communities. In support of growth and development, Honorable Speaker, our initiatives are also aimed at enabling and mobilizing private sector and civil society capacity. Building on the success of our renewable energy initiatives, the Independent Power Producers Program will be extended to include coal and gas power projects over the period ahead. Thanks to Minister Jumat Peterson. Measures to strengthen tourism, agriculture, and agro-processing are in progress. Collaboration with regional partner countries is being stepped up to improve border management, streamline trade flows, and invest in transport and communications corridors. Investment in our cities is being accelerated, creating opportunities for participation of developers and other partners in housing, infrastructure, and commercial development. Regulatory challenges that affect mining investment and employment are being addressed. A path-breaking study of the cost of doing business has been completed, and municipalities in particular are working on identified reforms to make it easier to do business in municipalities. Progress has been made towards a minimum wage framework and to reduce workplace conflict, the former under the guidance of the Deputy President. The National Health Insurance White Paper has been published, and proposals for comprehensive social security will be released by mid-year for discussion in NEDLAC. Engagement with social partners needs to be intensified. Project plans and investments need to be managed and implemented. But I know you will join me in acknowledging that the real champions of our development are activists and entrepreneurs, officials and facilitators who get on with the job day by day of managing programs and running businesses, serving communities and meeting needs. In their hands, because these are the people who actually work, lies our future. Our faith communities, non-governmental organizations, and community volunteers all demonstrate every day that basic needs can be met with dignity and social solidarity. Initiatives like Operation Hydrate and the Gift of the Givers initiatives have led the way in responding to the impact of the drought, for example. Gauteng Province's Terisano Outreach Program similarly emphasizes that communities can be co-partners with government in accelerating service delivery. We can strengthen these efforts by government, business, religious and community organizations by working together. So let us ask ourselves, in an interconnected world, what is going on out there and how does it impact upon us? Honourable members, South Africa's economic prospects are intertwined with global economic developments. We're part of this global economy. A period of unprecedented monetary stimulus, what everybody calls quantitative easing, in response to the 2008 recession is not yet over, and global volatility and structural imbalances are far from resolved. And what this means in simple terms is every day you wake up, don't be surprised that something new has happened in the global economy to impact upon us negatively. The pace of economic growth has slowed in many countries. The price of oil has fallen significantly over the past year, and that's a benefit to many people. Our major exports, platinum, gold, iron ore, and coal, have seen substantial declines in global demand and in prices. The effects on our economy of these phenomena is indeed widespread. Lower export earnings, lower revenue, declining investment, job losses, and in some cases, business failures. For the world as a whole, growth declined from 3.4% in 2014 to an estimated 3.1% last year. In sub-Saharan Africa, the decline was from 5% to 3.5%. A moderate recovery is expected over the next 2 years. It is notable that faster growth is being achieved in countries which have undertaken bold structural reforms. India has scaled back subsidies for industry and has opened up trade opportunities and the promotion of skilled migration, urban investment, and labor-intensive manufacturing and agro-processing. Similar reforms are being undertaken in Southeast Asian economies and several African economies. These efforts have helped to boost investor sentiment and reduce economic vulnerabilities in these countries. Our own structural challenges and reforms are articulated in the National Development Plan. Our economic recovery depends on our ability to convert the plan into actions that deliver on the promise for a better life for all. If we then look at our own economy, fellow South Africans, growth rates of below 1% fall short and far short of what we need to create employment and to reduce poverty and inequality in South Africa. The Treasury's current estimation of growth for the year is 0.9% this year, after it being 1.3% in 2015. This reflects both depressed global conditions and local factors. It also reflects the impact of the drought, policy uncertainty in a few areas, the effect of protracted labor disputes on business confidence, electricity supply constraints, and regulatory barriers to investment. However, the institutional foundations of our economy remain resilient. Macroeconomic policy is effective and stable. The inflation targeting framework provides an anchor for price and wage setting. Our banks and financial institutions are well capitalized, and we have liquid rand-denominated debt markets, very important in the current environment. The architecture of our constitution, justice system, public and private law, and dispute resolution mechanisms is robust. We have excellent universities, and of course we need more of them, and research centers. We have a strong private sector. We are a resourceful people, committed, I hope, most of us, to contributing to a better South Africa. I want to quote Mr. Raymond Wesley, again a person who wrote to us, as follows, and I quote, "As South Africans, we don't have an appreciation of the strides we've made. Minister, show South Africans, especially the rich, that people's lives have changed for the better in South Africa." This is indeed true, yet there is more to be done, as we all know. I want to suggest that we are a resilient people, that we can become committed and be resourceful in tackling the challenges that we have ahead of us and seizing the opportunities and learning how to turn adversity into opportunity. In the numbers, Honourable Speaker, there are indicators that an economic turnaround is possible if we build confidence and make the right choices. Business services, tourism, and communication services continued to expand over the past year, contributing positively to job creation. While overall agricultural output has declined under severe drought conditions, there has been strong growth in several export products, including nuts and berries, grapes, and both deciduous and citrus fruits. Overall export growth by volume was over 9% last year and will continue to benefit from the competitiveness of the rand. South African exports to the rest of Africa now exceeds 300 billion rands a year, up from 230 billion rands just 3 years ago. Retail trade data for December 2015 indicates growth of over 4% in real terms, signaling that consumer spending remains buoyant despite declining confidence. Investments amounting to over 20 billion rands have recently been announced in the automotive sector, thanks to the hard-working Minister Davies. Yet our economy is not growing fast enough to raise employment and to improve average incomes. Honourable Speaker, investment growth must be substantially scaled up, and that's our challenge for the next few years. So we are resolved to restore the momentum of growth, to ensure that it is inclusive and sustainable, and to preserve our economy's investment-grade status. As Minister Nene put it in his October medium-term budget policy statement address, and I quote, "If we do not achieve growth, revenue will not increase. If revenue does not increase, expenditure cannot be expended," end of quote. This means we must address institutional and regulatory barriers to business investment and growth. It means we must give greater impetus to sectors and industries where we have a competitive advantage. It means being bold where there is a need for structural change, innovation, and doing things differently. Above all, we need agility and urgency in implementing plans, not just talking about them. International experience has demonstrated that growth is ignited by strong and stable political and economic institutions, sound infrastructure that reduces the cost of doing business and facilitates trade, competition between firms and openness to trade, and an environment where firms invest and undertake research and development. We also know that the more inclusive the economy, the greater its scope for growth. These are the challenges we hear from South Africans today and how we respond to them. We are responding to appeals from the business sector for greater certainty in respect of policies that affect investment decisions. We hear you. We are engaging with proposals from organized labor for a minimum wage policy and for progress on opportunities for young people in particular. We are responding to action in communities where services are missing or badly managed. We are crafting solutions to the voices of students regarding fees and housing. I need to emphasize that violent protest, however, is not an acceptable way of articulating these challenges. Also, in these and other areas, the choices we make cannot meet every need, and the action we require involves collective action by many stakeholders. Today's budget sets out government's plans for the next 3 years, building on what we have achieved since 1994 and what has been articulated in the State of the Nation address. It also signals the actions underway to improve policy coordination and collaboration between social partners and stakeholders. As outlined by the President, initiatives are in progress to address our policy coordination and implementation challenges. Here are some examples. Over 80 bills and plans have been reviewed since September last year as part of the new socio-economic impact assessment program under Minister Hadebe's oversight. The aim is to address possible regulatory constraints in a proactive way. Visa regulations have been revised in the right direction. Talks are in progress under Minister Oliphant's leadership to improve workplace dispute resolution procedures. Minister Davies is introducing and inducting a new investment promotion agency to streamline administrative procedures and enhance our position as an African financial center. Special economic zones and employment-intensive sectors with export potential have been prioritized by the Industrial Development Corporation. Initiatives to transform ownership of land and improve productivity in agriculture are underway, and Ministers Zokwana and Nkwenti are addressing drought-related challenges in rural areas. Under Minister Molewa's guidance, South Africa's response to the global climate change challenge has been prepared, and work with the National Business Initiative on the green economy has been strengthened. Our environmental employment programs continue to earn international recognition. The Community Works Program is expanding its reach, and the Jobs Fund partnership projects of 12 billion rands have been approved. Please do that regularly so you stay awake. Building on the Pakisa Oceans Economy Initiative, a 9 billion rand investment in rig repair and maintenance facilities at Saldanha Bay is planned, and work has begun on a new gas terminal and oil and ship repair facility in Durban. Minister Jumat Peterson is overseeing our renewable energy, coal and gas IPP program and preparatory work for investment in nuclear power. Minister Pando's department is leading work on beneficiation initiatives, including titanium, fuel cells, fluorochemicals, and composite materials. Minister Motseka is working with social partners in the National Education Collaboration Trust to identify and implement school improvement initiatives. In recent weeks, President Zuma, other ministers, and I have engaged with business leaders to understand their concerns and views and, of course, get their contributions. Confidence and shared understanding have been reinforced and will be reinforced even further as we go forward. These engagements are clearly critical to boosting our economy and must be extended to include regional forums and other stakeholders. We particularly welcome the working groups that have been established and several practical proposals for joint action between government and the private sector. These include a collaborative initiative to combat corruption and abuse of tender procedures, a new fund to accelerate small business and medium enterprise development, and measures to build investor confidence and contribute to social cohesion. By removing constraints, honourable members, supporting innovation, protecting jobs, diversifying our economy, and exploring new opportunities, we can indeed expand growth prospects. Our economic outlook is not what it should be. Global uncertainty and the drought are very real challenges, but our efforts to build a better future must continue. By working together, we can increase growth, we can broaden participation, and inspire confidence in our economy and in our society. Honourable members, the economist Danny Roderick has recently noted that in those countries that are still growing rapidly, despite the global economic headwinds or difficulties, public investment is doing much of the work. To finance the investment needed for sustainable growth, we have the institutional capacity to blend international and domestic savings and to combine public and private sector financing to mitigate risk and to reduce the cost of capital. The Presidential Infrastructure Coordination Commission, under Ministers Nkwenti and Patel, has brought greater coherence to our strategic investment plans. They have drawn attention to the need for multi-year appropriations for major capital projects, something that we will work on shortly. Reform in this regard is under consideration. Energy investments amounting to 70 billion rands this year and will be 70 billion rands this year and will be over 180 billion rands over the next 3 years as construction of the Medupi, Kusile and Ingula power plants is completed. Transport and logistics infrastructure accounts for nearly 292 billion rands over the next 3 years under Minister Peters' oversight. Transnet is acquiring 232 diesel locomotives for its general freight business and 100 locomotives for its coal lines. There is 3.7 billion rand set aside to upgrade the Moloto Road. 30 billion rands for provincial roads maintenance, and 18 billion rands for bus rapid transit projects in cities, and refurbishment of over 1,700 metro rail and Socialoza mail coaches. 62 billion rands is allocated for the housing subsidy programs of Minister Sisulu's department, and 34 billion rands for bulk infrastructure and residential services in metropolitan municipalities. 28 billion rands will be spent over the medium-term expenditure framework or period on improving health facilities, and 54 billion rands on education infrastructure. Under Minister Mokonyane's leadership, the next phase of the Olifants River water scheme is in progress. Completion of supply to the Lukanje municipality in the Eastern Cape, completion of the Wolmaranstraat wastewater treatment works, and construction of the Polihali Dam as part of the Lesotho Highlands project. These are massive projects. I think you should compliment her on this work. Thank you. I need some favors from her. These are some components of the 870 billion rands that public sector infrastructure programs that will spend over the next 3 years. But our growth and development depends also on an expanding envelope of enterprise investment in industry, in mining, in mineral beneficiation, in agriculture and agro-processing, in housing, commercial development, and tourism facilities. There are also initiatives in progress to reinforce financing of these projects. The Industrial Development Corporation continues to play a leading role in financing manufacturing and beneficiation projects. It plans to invest 100 billion rands over the next 5 years, including 23 billion rands set aside to support black industrialists. We have completed a 7.9 billion capital transfer to the Development Bank of Southern Africa, approved in 2013, which enables it to expand lending and implementation support to municipalities and to complement private sector funding of strategic infrastructure projects. The bank aims to increase lending by 48 billion rands over the next 3 years. Initiatives to reinforce municipal implementation capacity have also been prioritized. The Land Bank has set aside a concessionary loan facility to assist farmers in recovering from the impact of the current drought conditions. Over the next 3 years, 15 billion rands is allocated for land acquisition, farm improvements, and expanding agro-processing opportunities. I am also pleased to confirm that the new development bank, what we know as the BRICS Bank, will open its Africa Regional Center in Johannesburg next month. Our first installment of 2 billion rands was paid in December last year, and the budget makes provision for further commitments over the medium term, and we'll be passing the hat around, ladies and gentlemen. This initiative gives impetus to our role as a financial center for Africa and will facilitate access to global finance by African investors and institutions. So the capacity to mobilize finance is in place. Amendments to bank regulations are proposed, furthermore, which will facilitate lending for long-term infrastructure investment. In energy, transport, telecommunications, and urban development, there are many opportunities for joint public and private investment and facilities management. Corporate investment and participation by trade union funds in infrastructure development needs appropriate policies and market structure frameworks, clarifying the roles and linkages between public and private sector service providers. Progress in these regulatory arrangements is the key to more rapid investment and more inclusive growth in these sectors. Our working partnership with business leaders and social stakeholders under President Zuma's initiative is about implementing these and other aspects of the National Development Plan. Now we come to the tough part. What do we mean by fiscal consolidation? This year's budget, Honourable Speaker, has as one of its focus areas fiscal consolidation. In simple terms, we cannot spend money we do not have. We cannot borrow beyond our ability to repay. If you can afford 1,000 rands to be repaid, borrow 1,000 rands, not 2,000 rands. Until we can ignite growth and generate more revenue, we have to be tough on ourselves. A central objective is to stabilize debt as a percentage of GDP, and to achieve this, the new budget framework sets deficit targets, as I indicated earlier, for the next 3 years, which are lower than the October medium-term budget policy statement projections. Spending plans are reduced, a higher revenue target is set, net national debt is projected to stabilize at 46.2% of GDP in 2017-18 and to decline after that. These budget proposals signal government's commitment to a prudent, sustainable fiscal policy trajectory and respond directly to the changed circumstances since the 2015 MTBPS was tabled by Minister Nene. Honourable members, we have to take into account the slowdown in revenue associated with slower economic growth over the past year. In last year's budget, we projected total tax revenue of about 1.08 billion rands. The revised estimate is 11.6 billion rands short of this total, but nonetheless slightly higher than the 2014-15 outcome. This is a most commendable effort in the circumstances, and all South Africans have contributed to achieving some of these objectives. And in particular, the 14,000 odd staff of the Revenue Service have done a sterling job. A consolidated revenue target of 1.3 billion rands is set for 2016-17, or 30.2% of GDP. Expenditure will be 1.4 billion rands, leaving a budget deficit of 139 billion rands, because that's what we go out and borrow, and at 3.2% of GDP. The deficit will incline, as I indicated earlier, to 2.4% in 2018-19. Details of the proposed adjustments are set out in the budget review. I have highlighted key spending priorities already, and I need to emphasize that additional spending on higher education, small business development, and amounts set aside for responding to drought and other contingencies are accommodated through stringent cost containment measures across all departments. And amongst these cost containment measures are the following: restrictions on filling managerial and administrative vacancies subject to review of human resource plans and elimination of unnecessary positions, and this is without affecting first-line or front-line service providing staff. Reduced transfers for operating budgets of public entities, capital budgeting reforms to align plans with budget allocations while strengthening maintenance procedures. And what we're saying here is that stop just spending money on new investments in infrastructure, also spend money on looking after the infrastructure we have. Mandatory use of the new e-tender portal, thereby enforcing procurement transparency and accessible reference prices for a wide range of goods and services. This will make and transform procurement in South Africa and make it very transparent so that it's hard to crook the system. You should clap for that, I think. A national travel and accommodation policy and instructions on conference costs, basically reduce all of them. New guidelines to limit the value of vehicle purchases for political office bearers. Renegotiation of government leasing contracts, new centrally negotiated contracts for banking services, ICT infrastructure and services, health technology, school building, and learner support materials. Initiatives of the Chief Procurement Office will be extended to include monitoring of state-owned companies' procurement plans and supply chain processes, and reviews of contracts above 10 million rands to ensure value for money, and that is public's money. Centrally negotiated contracts will be mandatory with effect from April 2016. As Ms. Nobuntu Mbele advised me, and I quote, "Minister, government should also tighten its belt," close quotes. I've tightened it by one notch. The Central Procurement Office's mandate is to achieve savings of 25 billion rands a year by the third year of the current MTF period, out of the government procurement budget of about 500 billion rands a year. Our reform proposals draw on a consultation program last year that reached over 7,000 suppliers, 2,500 supply chain practitioners, and attracted over 27,000 responses to a national survey. It is clear that we can achieve considerable savings to government while also ensuring that procurement processes are streamlined and service providers are paid on time. I need to acknowledge the valued cooperation of Minister Ramatlodi in addressing another important area, and that is personnel management challenges. Government procurement reforms also rely on collaboration with my colleagues and their respective departments, Minister Gnesi in Public Works, Minister Davies and Minister Zulu in respect of industrial participation, supplier development, and black economic empowerment, Minister Kwele on telecommunications and the robust rollout of broadband services, which is both an area of cost saving in itself and an enabling condition for more efficient procurement systems and electronic communications. In saying this, members of the House, I want to draw attention to the broader opportunities that well-managed public administration reforms offer. Investments by telecommunication partners in fast internet connectivity for schools, clinics, and government buildings brings down the costs of overtime for internet connectivity for neighborhood homes and businesses. When government office accommodation projects are well planned, they create opportunities for commercial and residential development in the surrounding precinct. And government as an employer contributes to training and organizational development across the wider economy itself. Inclusive growth is in part about these linkages between public and private sector development. Now the part that concerns some of your pockets, if not all, tax proposals. Inclusivity is also an important principle in our tax system. Honorable Speaker, South Africa has built one of the most effective tax authorities in the developing world, if not elsewhere as well. Thank you for the credit you're giving me. The Revenue Service has made huge strides over the past decade in enforcing the law while providing assistance to small businesses and individuals. Public compliance with tax obligations is high. I am deeply mindful that we have a corresponding obligation as government to improve the impact of every rand we spend and to eliminate waste and corruption. Inclusivity is also about the details of tax design, how it supports or hinders small or growing businesses, how the burden of tax is shared across individuals and households in different circumstances and in different income brackets, and how taxes contribute to environmental and health objectives. This year, in view of the need to raise additional revenue and reduce the budget deficit, we have paid special attention to the fairness and inclusivity of the tax system. We've also been mindful of the need to moderate the impact of tax increases on households and firms in the present economic context. In other words, we don't want to impose additional burdens, but there has to be some. Our tax proposals include the following: personal income tax relief of 5.5 billion rands, which partially compensates for inflation, focused mainly on the lower and middle income earners, not the high income earners. Should I tell you about the increases you're going to get now? An increase in the monthly medical tax credit allowance, an increase of 30 cents a litre in the general fuel levy in view of the low price of oil, introduction of a tire levy to finance recycling programs, increases in the incandescent globe tax, the plastic bag levy, and the motor vehicles emissions tax. For those of you who like fizzy drinks, introduction of a tax on sugar-sweetened beverages. increases of between 6 and 8.5% in duties on alcoholic beverages and tobacco products. The Income Tax Act already contains measures to encourage provision of bursaries by employees to employees and their relatives. It is proposed that the income eligibility limits and qualifying bursary values should be increased. Inclusion of industry-based training programs in the list of activities qualifying for tax exemption is also under consideration. What we are trying to do here is increase the possibilities of people offering bursaries and internships as well. Our current taxes on wealth are under review by the Davis Committee. Higher capital gains tax inclusion rates are proposed for the coming year, together with an increase in the annual amount above which capital gains tax becomes taxable. So there's an increase in capital gains tax in simple terms. The transfer duty rate on properties above 10 million rands will increase from 11% to 13%. And measures are proposed to strengthen the estate duty and donations tax. We will continue to act aggressively against evasion of tax through transfer pricing abuses, misuse of tax treaties, and illegal or illicit money flows. This is especially for Honorable Shivambu. Drawing on the work of the OECD, the G20 Joint Project on Base Erosion and Profit Shifting, and independent bodies such as the Tax Justice Network, further measures will be taken to address such revenue losses, including inappropriate use of hybrid debt instruments. Honourable members, billions of rands are being lost through these mechanisms, and we need to start pooling the right skills in the right places in order to contest this. With effect from 2017, international agreements on information sharing will enable tax authorities to act more effectively against illicit flows and abusive practices by multinational corporations and wealthy individuals. In other words, one country will be able to share your tax information with another country which also has your tax information so that we can put all your incomes together. I'm sure you agree that's very fair. Building on the expertise gained by the Large Business Centre since its establishment in 2004, SARS is well placed to take advantage of the new common reporting system. Our international collaboration is an essential part of efforts to ensure that the tax system remains robust and contributes to inclusive growth. I will announce further steps in this regard later in the year. Time is now running out for taxpayers who still have undisclosed assets abroad. Please listen carefully. With next year's deadline in mind, additional relief will be offered for a period of 6 months from October this year to allow non-compliant taxpayers to regularize their affairs. Though not introduced today, we publish on our website the draft bill on the Special Voluntary Disclosure Program and the Rates and Threshold Bill. What this means is if you've got money hidden in mattresses or somewhere, bring it out, approach the right tax authorities, and declare that money both to the, if you've taken it out of the country, to the Reserve Bank and the Revenue Service, and you'll have to just pay a small penalty for that. Yeah, some people call it uplang. Alongside the impact of tax on takeaway home pay, honourable members, there are also contributions to pension and provident funds, group life arrangements, and medical schemes. Not everyone makes these contributions, and so their benefits are not universally enjoyed. Our policy commitment is to achieve universal health coverage and comprehensive social security in time. These contribute to the broader framework for inclusive growth, decent work, income security, and social protection that forms part of the National Development Plan. These are not straightforward reforms. Health financing is complex because the demands unavoidably exceed available funds. This is the case even in advanced rich countries. Retirement and social security reform is complex because existing arrangements create long-term obligations, and the needs of today all too easily crowd out provisions for tomorrow. Yet, we must confront these challenges. Minister Motsoaledi has published the White Paper on National Health Insurance. He has rightly emphasized that public health service delivery improvements must be prioritized and reform of private health and medical scheme and of the medical scheme environment is needed. In order to take the White Paper's proposals forward, Minister Motsoaledi and I will provide further details of the financing of NHI in due course. In taking the comprehensive social security agenda forward, we have to recognize that existing social security arrangements are fragmented, which raises costs and leaves several social needs unaddressed. Minister Dlamini and I have been given the responsibility by the President for the Social Security Reform Program, which has to draw on both international good practice and interdepartmental work of recent years. Tighter regulation of the retirement fund industry is part of this reform effort. The intention is to protect members' interests and ensure that funds are not dissipated by unnecessary administration and financial costs, and that an income in retirement is assured. Our engagements with stakeholders will continue this year in the NEDLAC framework and elsewhere. To support a greater national savings effort, we introduced a tax-free savings account last year. The response has been most gratifying. About 150,000 accounts have been opened, equaling a savings of 1 billion rands at this stage. For those who have not yet taken this opportunity, you have until the end of the month to take advantage of this year's 30,000 rand limit for special tax treatment in these accounts. Let's increase those numbers. Let me assure public servants again that reform of the retirement system will not affect their accrued pension rights. Indeed, I am pleased to report that the investment portfolio of the Government Employees Pension Fund, GEPF, grew by 12.2% to 1.6 trillion rands in the year to March 2015. GEPF pensioners will receive a 5.3% increase in April this year. The Revenue Laws Amendment Bill 2016, introduced today, gives effect to the decision by Cabinet last week to postpone the annuitization requirements for Provident Fund members for 2 years to allow for further consultation with key stakeholders. The tax benefits will continue to be implemented from 1 March 2016 for all retirement fund contributions, including for Provident Funds. So this is a new benefit for workers who contribute to Provident Funds. For the first time, they will get a tax rebate like pension fund contributors get and will have extra money in their pockets. As I indicated earlier, we will engage further on these matters in NEDLAC. In respect of state-owned entities, Honourable Speaker, these entities have important roles to play in boosting growth and development. But there are issues to address in their governance, mandates, financing, and operations. The recently released report of the Presidential Review Commission on state-owned enterprises is a very welcome guide to the path ahead. It rightly emphasizes that effective leadership is central to progress. It notes that our infrastructure financing requirements are huge and require effective co-funding arrangements between these state entities and other investors. The asset base of state-owned entities is over 1 trillion rands, equal to about 27% of GDP. That's what the state owns. They maintain networks and provide services, power, roads, transport, water, communications, on which the rest of the economy depends. But the Commission's report indicates that the mandates of some of our entities overlap, some operate in markets that should be more transparently competitive, and some are no longer relevant to our developmental agenda. Some are in perpetual financial difficulties. So we must take decisive steps to ensure that they are effectively governed and that they contribute appropriately to the attainment of the goals of the National Development Plan. Firstly, as President Zuma has indicated, entities that are no longer necessary should be phased out. The resources raised or saved will be redirected to the balance sheets of state-owned companies that should grow. Secondly, where entities have overlapping mandates, rationalization options will be pursued. The merger of our housing DFIs is already in progress and a good example. There are entities, yes, please applaud Minister Sisulu, otherwise she's going to be upset with you. There are entities with regulatory responsibilities where capacity should be combined. We have national and provincial entities, and in a large number of them, with diverse property holding, interests in farming or trading or manufacturing enterprises, often inherited from the pre-1994 dispensation, typically buried in subsidiary companies that are not publicly accountable. These are unnecessary state investments and often a drain on government resources. They are also assets with the potential for growth in independent hands. It seems clear, furthermore, that we do not need to be invested in 4 airline businesses. You guys should outmatch them, you know. Minister Brown and I have agreed to explore the possible merger of SAA and SA Express under a strengthened board with a view to engaging with a potential minority equity partner. Fly SAA. Thirdly, the balance sheets of several entities with extensive infrastructure investment responsibilities are now stretched to their limits. Government has provided support in the form of guarantees, which now total 467 billion rands, or 11.5% of GDP. In other words, ladies and gentlemen and honorable members, if somebody says, give me back the money that we borrowed on these guarantees, we'll have to find 467 billion rands tomorrow. This is a source of pressure on the sovereign ratings. Yet we need to accelerate infrastructure investment in the period ahead. So where do we get the money? So we must broaden the range and scope of our co-funding partnerships with private sector and other investors like trade union investment companies. This requires an appropriate framework to govern concession agreements and associated debt and equity instruments and appropriate regulation of the market structure. In taking this forward, we are able to draw on our experience in road funding concessions, in building the renewable energy market, and in promoting broadband telecommunications. Across these and other sectors, we have much to learn from each other, both nationally and through provincial and local initiatives. Minister Brown, in addition, is in discussion with Transnet's leadership on measures to accelerate private sector participation in the ports and freight rail sector, and we are not talking about privatization. I thought the only P word was Pravin, but now we have privatization. The intention is to improve efficiencies, reduce the cost of doing business, and increase investment in port facilities and inland terminals. This will complement investments that Transnet has already initiated through its market demand strategy. Our aim is to strengthen our state entities so that they can play a dynamic role in our development. Further financial support to state-owned companies will depend on the clarity of this mandate and firm resolution of governance challenges. Our regulatory agencies have a special responsibility in this regard. In setting prices for electricity, transport, and water utilities, they have to ensure that investment can continue to be financed and that costs are properly managed and people can afford the costs. The strength of our major state-owned companies does not lie in protecting their dominant monopoly positions, but in their capacity to partner with business investors and other investors, industry, mining companies, property and logistics developers, and, for example, as I mentioned earlier, union investment companies, both domestically and across global supply chains. Before concluding, Honourable Speaker, allow me to return to the main elements of the 2016 budget, our spending plans and their contributions to growth and broadening development. Our approach is to build on our strengths, directly address weaknesses, and be bold when new initiatives are needed. The budget framework brings forward our fiscal consolidation, as I said, and reduces our budget deficit to 2.4 by 18-19. 2018-19. Taxes are raised moderately across a broad base while limiting the impact on lower-income families. Personal spending has been curtailed and cost containment measures are reinforced. Expenditure growth is focused on post-school education and training, economic infrastructure, and social protection and health services. In respect of economic infrastructure, budget allocations for water infrastructure this year take into account the specific needs of drought-affected areas and the need to address water losses in critical supply networks. The Regional Bulk Infrastructure Grant Program has been allocated 15 billion rands over the medium term for the construction of bulk water and sanitation infrastructure. Public transport improvements in our cities are again prioritized alongside better road maintenance and rehabilitation plans. Over the MTF period, 1.6 billion rands is allocated to SA Connect broadband program to support access in remote areas and of schools, healthcare facilities, and government institutions. Steps to reduce the regulatory burden for business investors are also in progress. These include the establishment of Invest South Africa as a partnership with the private sector and concerted efforts by our largest cities to reduce the administrative cost of starting businesses. A review of business incentives has been initiated to strengthen their impact and to focus those initiatives in respect of growth, productivity, competitiveness, and trade. 475 million rands has been reprioritized to the Department of Small Business Development for assistance to small and medium enterprises and cooperatives. Programs aimed at revitalizing agriculture include spending on small-scale farming and developing agri-parks in rural economies. An amount of 2.8 billion rands is allocated over the medium term to Fetsatlala, a food security initiative. The Department of Agriculture, Forestry and Fisheries aims to bring 120,000 hectares of land into productive use in the period ahead, benefiting 145,000 subsistence and smallholder producers each year. Already this year, the Department of Water and Sanitation has reprioritized 502 million rands to deliver water, protect springs, refurbish boreholes in response to drought conditions. Funds have also been provided for feed and support for livestock farmers and disaster relief measures. Additional drought response allocations will be made as required in the adjustments appropriation later this year. In respect of higher education, an additional 16.3 billion rands has been allocated for higher education over the next 3 years. 5.7 billion rands of this addresses the shortfall caused by keeping fees for 2016 academic year at 2015 levels, zero increase, and the carry-through costs of over the MTF period. 2.5 billion rands goes to the NSFAS scheme to clear outstanding student debt, along with a further 8 billion rands over the medium term to enable current students to complete their studies. In respect of basic education, early childhood education, our expenditure on basic education will increase from 204 billion rands this year to 254 billion rands in 2018-19. By 2018, 510 inappropriate and unsafe schools will be rebuilt, 1,120 schools will be supplied with water, and 916 schools with electricity. An additional allocation of 813 million for early childhood development is proposed to increase the number of children in ECD centers by 104,000 over the MTEF period. In respect of health and welfare services, 4.5 billion rands is budgeted over the medium term for revitalizing health facilities in the 11 NHI pilot districts and related health system reforms. An additional 740 million has been allocated to strengthen TB programs to encourage early detection and treatment, 1 billion rands for the expansion of the antiretroviral treatment program. Additional funds are allocated for new substance abuse treatment centers in the Northern Cape, Free State, Western Cape, and Northwest provinces. Now, for the older people that are listening to us carefully and others that depend on social grants. Our overall expenditure on social assistance will increase from 129 billion rands this year to 165 billion rands in 2018-19. The old age, disability and care dependency grants will rise by 80 rands to 1,500 rands in April, and by a further 10 rands to 1,510 rands in October. The child support grant will rise by 20 rands to 350 rands in April, and the foster care grant by 30 rands to 890 rands. In respect of defense, public order and safety, spending will rise from 172 billion rands this year to 204 billion rands in 2018-19. Taking into account the recommendations of the Farnham Commission of Inquiry, an amount of 598 million rands is allocated to enhancing capacity of public order policing units over the MTF period ahead. Allocations are also made to strengthen institutions supporting constitutional democracy and to combat corruption and to enhance the independence of the judiciary. Funds are allocated for the information regulator established in terms of the Protection of Personal Information Act of 2013. In respect of provinces and provincial expenditure management, Honourable Speaker, our Constitution requires an equitable division of nationally collected revenue between national, provincial and local government. Taking into account the current fiscal framework, the provincial MECs for finance have agreed to a joint action plan to address expenditure management and service delivery improvements in each of their provinces. Some of the key measures that they've adopted are the following. Firstly, containment of administrative personnel expenditure while protecting education and health service staff. Secondly, improved revenue collection by the provinces themselves. Rationalization and closure of redundant and underperforming programs and entities. And intensification of cost containment measures in keeping with national guidelines. I think you should congratulate the MECs. They're going to watch you, those of you that in the provinces didn't clap enough for them. In respect of municipal financial management, we are mindful that municipalities face growing pressures from both the rising cost of bulk services and rapidly growing numbers of households. Municipal capital spending exceeded 53 billion rands in 2014-15. Yet we continue to see underspending of infrastructure grants in many municipalities. A review of these grants has led to several new proposals for improvement in delivery of infrastructure. Firstly, grant frameworks will in future allow for refurbishing of assets, as I said earlier, recognizing the long-term nature of municipal infrastructure. Maintenance is sometimes more important than new infrastructure. Water sector grants, secondly, will be restructured to reduce duplication and the associated administrative burden. Thirdly, refinements are proposed to take into account the diverse challenges of urban and rural areas and the different-sized towns and cities. And fourthly, public transport transfers to cities will now be allocated through a formula, bringing greater certainty and sustainability to these funding arrangements. This year brings our fourth fully democratic local government elections at our doorstep. In recognition of this, Treasury will launch a data portal to provide all stakeholders with comparable, verified information on municipal financial and non-financial performance. I hope this will further stimulate citizen involvement in local governance. The elections will also see a significant change in municipal demarcations. The number of municipalities will be reduced from 278 to 257, with the objective of improving their viability and sustainability. Local government allocations will be revised to take account of these boundary changes, and over 400 million rands is allocated over the next 2 years to assist with this transition in the merger process. The Back to Basics program, launched in 2014, aimed at improving service delivery performance of municipalities, is entering its second phase of implementation under Minister Van Rooyen. It involves It involves active monitoring of performance in governance and service delivery, support to struggling municipalities, and stronger accountability measures. Our investment in cities and urban networks are as follows. Cities are already taking steps to encourage higher land use density and inner city development under the authority of the new Spatial Planning and Land Use Management Act. This will unlock significant further private sector development potential across our cities, focused on strategic corridors. Bus rapid transport systems are operational and expanding in Johannesburg, Tshwane, Cape Town, and George, and will be extended to Ekurhuleni and eThekwini this year, although we've got to watch the sustainability of these programs as well. About 6 billion rands is allocated to this program in 2016-17. Improvements to rail rolling stock and infrastructure will begin to improve the daily travel experience of commuters. We owe that to the workers of South Africa. Associated with these transport investments, over 90 integrated land development projects, valued at more than 130 billion rands, are in progress to reshape our cities in partnership with the private sector. Let me give you some examples. In eThekwini, the Konubia node comprises 25,000 housing units. An inner city regeneration program is also underway, including projects at Bridge City, Centrum, The Point, and the interconnecting corridor. In the Tembisa corridor in Ekurhuleni, 6.5 billion rands in public investment will leverage 8 billion rands in private sector investment to deliver housing, commercial, and office facilities. In Cape Town, the N2 Gateway Housing Program is continuing, and together with the redevelopment of the Voortrekker Road corridor, Conradi Hospital, the Athlone Power Station, and other sites. In Tshwane, investments are focused on the Mabopane Station Hub, which is the gateway to the north for more than 150,000 passengers a day, and has an informal market accommodating approximately 2,500 traders. In Mangaung, the 2.6 billion rands mixed-use airport development node is in construction. An inner-city residential development is planned, and the Vista Park and Brandkop projects will yield over 8,500 housing units at a total development cost of over 1.9 billion rands. In Johannesburg, the corridors of freedom connecting Soweto, Alexandra, Sandton, and the Joburg CBD bring together public transport improvements, social amenities, and partnerships with property developers to increase settlement densities and improve social mobility. Honourable Speaker, our economic imperative is to ignite inclusive growth. This is central for jobs, for lowering debt, for delivering services, and building infrastructure for a 21st century economy. Let us chart a new course for the economy and the well-being of all South Africans, particularly for those hardest hit by unemployment, the low-skilled and the youth. This is not only crucial to address social imbalances and inequality, it is also fundamental to encouraging investment. The recent tremors felt by the emerging markets are a warning that we need to take corrective steps urgently, or we will be all worse off. At the same time, we need to move forward to mobilize the resources and capacity of all our people, large and small enterprises, civil society organizations, and importantly, the public more generally. The joint actions we need will not always be easy. All too often, bureaucrats and business people speak past each other. The needs of the young are not the same as those of the elderly like yourselves. The rhythms of the township differ from those of the suburb. Race, class, language differences hold back progress, even when we have shared aspirations and shared goals. We need to bridge these divides. I believe that we are resilient enough and committed enough and hopefully resourceful enough to overcome these challenges and seize these opportunities. We can turn today's adversity into opportunities. We can address the weaknesses that create policy uncertainty. We can build on the strengths that our resource base and our institutions and our workforce offers us. We can do things differently and indeed be innovative. We have avoided reckless policies which might have dragged us into recession or reversed the capital flows we need. We have a sound macroeconomic and fiscal framework and the will to work together for faster and inclusive growth. Allow me, in conclusion, to thank you, Mr. President and Mr. Deputy President, for your leadership and support. I also want to thank Cabinet colleagues for your contributions to addressing the challenges before ourselves and for working as a team. Members of the Ministers' Committee on the Budget, including the Deputy Minister, Jonas, who's been a pillar of strength, have provided sterling support. I want to thank our provincial premiers and finance MECs and municipal mayors who share our fiscal and financial responsibilities. Please join me in also expressing appreciation to Minister Nene for his valuable contribution to our government and treasury. Thank you, thank you, thank you. I want to finish the speech now. Director General Lungisa Fuzile, who is the second pillar of strength in the Treasury. For his integrity and leadership, and to all the officials of the National Treasury. To Governor Kanyako, the Deputy Governors and staff of the South African Reserve Bank. To Commissioner Moyane and the 14,000 staff in particular of the South African Revenue Service. The Commissioners and staff of the Financial and Fiscal Commission, the chairpersons, boards, chief executive officers and staff of the DBSA, the Land Bank, the PIC, the FIC, the Financial Services Board, and the Government Pensions Administration Agency. The staff and constituency representatives of NEDLAC, and particularly its Public Finance Chamber, and finally, to Judge Dennis Davis and members of the Tax Committee. Because I'm passing on some difficult tasks, I must also especially be grateful to the Chair of the Finance Committee, the Honorable Karim, Acting Chair of the Appropriations Committee, Honorable Kwabaza, Chairs of the Select Committees on Finance and Appropriation, Honorable De Beer and Honorable Mohai, who have a responsibility for facilitating consideration of the Division of Revenue Bill, the Appropriation Bill, and the Revenue Bills, which will be tabled later in the year. And also to my family. Politics can be rough, so they face rough times. In conclusion, looking back on his extraordinary life of resilience and of commitment, former President Mandela had this to say, and I think we should take it to heart. And I quote, "I am fundamentally an optimist. Whether that comes from nurture or nature, I cannot say. Part of being optimistic is keeping one's head pointed towards the sun, one's feet moving forward. There are many dark moments when my faith in humanity was sorely tested, but I would not and could not give myself up to despair. That way lays defeat and death. Let's be resilient. Thank you very much.